Hello, everyone, and welcome to our second session for Writing for Games this month. Today we'll be talking a little bit about branching dialogue and twine. Might maybe look at a couple of game trailers if we have time, but I'm going to keep this one tight because I need to get back to getting your folks your work graded and back to you. So, okay. Does anyone who's here, who's live right now, have any questions they want to ask, just to start off with? Are you all doing well with branching dialogue and twine? Is it a cinch? Twine tends to be pretty easy once you kind of get used to it, but it can be a little bit tricky at first, and sometimes people get off on the wrong foot. And you've all completed your first assignment in twine. The trick at this point really is not basic use, but is what is branching dialogue, which can be a little hard to wrap your head around if you haven't played the kind of games that have branching dialogue. So I've created a new blank twine here, and twine 2 always starts with a passage. By the way, in twine 1.x, your first passage of any twine is named start. That's not the case. That's not necessary with twine 2. Instead, this little rocket ship here, yeah, that's your starting point. And if I create another passage, I can make this one our starting point. And I can just skip back and forth between twine 1 and twine 2 recently. The differences are small, but non-trivial. So I guess it'd be somewhere between the small and the trivial. Greater than trivial, but no greater than small. Anyway, you should know by now that the easiest way to edit a passage in twine is to put in a link, or sorry, to add a passage and put in a link. Caps lock. Oh, for Pete's sake. Okay, and that you generally want to make your split links either using an arrow or a vertical bar. The vertical bar is from twine 1. It still works in twine 2. The arrow with a dash and then a greater than sign is specific to twine 2. If you try to use it in twine 1, it will not work. And the reason to use split links pretty much any time is that otherwise you have to make the text that appears on screen the same as the text that the name of the next passage, and that becomes a real problem when you're linking back and forward and perhaps looping. Now here you have our basic, conjunction of two passages in twine. Now right here, we have a branch point. What's a branch point? Just to clarify, because people sometimes get a little bit confused. A passage in twine that links out to at least two different passages is a branch point. Okay, looks like we've got some more people. So this is a basic branch point here. And remember, the names of your passages in a split link do not show up. So what do we get when we test play this? Always. Right, I deleted the starting point. There we go. Is that our starting point again? We get 2 links. New passage or try this one. And they're both blank right now. Branch points are the key to writing branching dialogue. This week, you're being evaluated in no small part on having a sufficient number of branch points, as much or more than the number of passages, because you have a whole bunch of passages all in a row. That's not branching dialogue. That's linear. You could be doing this in a scripting engine like Final Draft. Games do not well, sometimes, okay, you might sometimes find you're actually asked to create something that's basically linear using a branching tool like Twine. But games generally don't go to games don't go more trouble than they need to. So if you don't need a tool that allows you to create choices, why use one? Do it in the simplest way possible. Oh yes, very important. If you haven't noticed, if you go into any passage in Twine 2 and delete all the text in it, basic instructions on Twine use pop up inside the passage. Very convenient if you get lost. Now, how you organize your Twine visually is up to you, but being very clear, you taking advantage of the space you have, and you have, pretty much as much space as you need. Take advantage of the space you have to make it as easy to follow the structure of your Twine as possible. This will help you revise it, and it also makes things much easier for me to grade. Oh, and good afternoon, Yasmin. I didn't see your comment until your chat comment. Now, with branching dialogue, it's easy to wind up with something that just keeps getting more and more complicated. Oh yes, absolutely, Joan. You can have your branching dialogue go like this. One thing I just don't recommend doing is something that looks like this.
Oh.
I'm going to use some simple links here in order to work this up very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what's going on here? It's actually really hard to tell, right? That's what I want you to do is, vertically or horizontally or in any other way that makes sense. Set up your Twine like a flowchart so you can see where you're going, where you've been. Again, this doesn't just make it easy for you to work with, it also makes it much easier for me to grade, and that results in higher scores for you. I accidentally changed my starting passage. There we go. Now, if you keep going on like this, it's going to get bigger and bigger and get completely out of hand. That's why you need to converge as well as branch. What's convergence? It's convergent. Very simple. You're welcome. Convergence is when some of your options start to link back together. This can also be where it starts to get a little bit trickier to make your structure clear. It doesn't have to be, completely crystal, but you want it to be as lucid as possible. And so you might, I'll get a message. Okay, check that out later. And of course, we can also do this, just doing this. Trying to automatically create the passage for you when you create a link to a passage that doesn't exist yet. That's part of why it's very important to make sure that your passage titles are all, among other things, capitalized the same. They've got a capital I and a lowercase I. What is trying to do with that? It gets confused. Wait, where do you want me to go? The hand. Now I could have a passage named capital I. As well as lowercase I. But then I'm going to have to manually create it. Oh, wait, never mind. Okay, that's the difference between 21 and 22. I'd kind of forgotten that. So, you can see how you can be branching out and converging at the same time. And thus not having this expand infinitely. And then eventually, sorry, you'll want to converge down to a small number of final endings. Like I've done here, by bringing all of these to passage Z. Thus, branching dialogue tends to have a vaguely diamond-like shape. Though having all these passages here condensed the same one often won't work well in your actual dialogues. Why? Because the chance of having things that are going on in each of these passages, all of which make sense, that all go to the same ending without it sounding forced, is pretty low. So you might end up with, say, 2 endings.
Oh, well, I ain't do that.
What? Do you have a question? So see, here we have a simple structure which branches and then starts converging and then comes to 2 endpoints. How do you know they're endpoints? It's really simple. In Twine, anything that doesn't have a link out is an ending. You don't have to mark it in a special way. You don't have to go and say the end. You can. But if you have passages in your Twine that kind of just stop, I'm going to treat those as endings. Sometimes in games specifically created in Twine, there'll be links to things like descriptions, and they'll be written like this. Here's tree. Come on, update. Here we go. And tree will be, just a description. Now, this is sometimes done in Twine games, but please do not do this in branching dialogue, because this to me looks like an ending. And in most tools other than Twine that work in the same basic way, if you have this as a place you can go to, and you can go back, and you can provide a link. Like that, so you know it's bi-direction. Now you can go here and get back to here, so it's not an ending anymore. So we have a couple of questions. Oh, okay. We already have branch a dog in our first one, so can we just add on to it for this one? If you have a first branch, okay, if you did dialogue in your first assignment, you can follow up from it, but I don't want you resubmitting dialogue and format from the first Twine assignment with extra stuff added on to it. You can go ahead and write the next scene or the next conversation, but it's a lot easier for me to evaluate your work without it either looking like you just copied stuff you did before or having to do a bunch of totaling up and subtracting out parts you already did, if your new submission is entirely new work. Now, if you want to, I'm okay with you basically starting your new Twine with something like this. Let me know if you want that. Yeah, exactly. Let me know what you're doing and make sure that it's all new work in assignment 3 and you're good. Another thing that sometimes is a little bit confusing for people, let me show you how you generally want to format branching dialogue. You start with the non-player character. That's an old role-playing term. Basically, it's a character that you as the writer are completely controlling for the player. Let's see. We got a silly little thing where let's go ahead and make this our starting passage. Test play. The non-player character says yodele hee hoo, and you can go yodeling yuck or yodele hee hee, and yodel back and forth at each other like lonely goat herds in The Sound of Music. Now, what's important here is not necessarily this tag. It's put as plain text what the other character says first, and then give the player a chance to control the responses, to choose between responses for the player character. The player should only be making decisions for one character, the character that normally in a game would be the main character, the protagonist in almost all cases. Meanwhile, you do need to be clear who's speaking, so you can use stage play style tags like this, or if you think it's clear enough, you can leave them off. So, for example, as long as you're consistent, this is fine. It's clear that this is the NPC and this is the player's choice of things to have the player character say. Or if you do something more complicated, like here, where there's a back and forth, now, wait a minute, we can't tell clearly who's saying this. So then you might do something like this. Let's play that. So now we've got, the lonely goat herd is saying yodele hee hoo. What was that? Yodele hee hoo, and then you get to choose your response. This kind of formatting is so much less strict. So much less strict than screenplay formatting. For example, is this correct or incorrect? The answer? It's correct if you're consistent about it. If you put all of the speech in quotes, then that's good. If you do that and then leave some out, that's bad. So, if you're going to use quote marks, use them everywhere. If you want to write this prose style, that's fine, but then, of course, you need to be consistent. And change it all the way throughout. Oh, and I have introduced a word here. Look. I have asked past tense and reply present tense. And of course, follow through from here. This is good enough for this format. So again, make sure your links are working. Test play. Do test. Your twins. Work on having a structure that branches out and then starts to converge back. For this assignment, you can have a maximum of 3 endings. Keep your formatting consistent. As long as it's consistent, I'll accept anything that is clear. Clear and consistent is good. If you want, for your own self-discipline's sake, to practice formatting everything like you would in a screenplay, as close as Twine allows, that's perfectly fine. Whatever you do, be consistent. Any questions at this point? Okay. Does anyone have any questions about... okay, so I assume at this point no one has any questions about Twine or branching dialogue. Does anyone have any questions they want to ask about other course materials or themes or things that kind of pique your interest as you've been going through the class? Okay, cool. Well, I did want to keep this tight, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap up here. If any of you come up with questions later, feel free to email or FSO message me. If you're watching the archive of this session on YouTube and you have questions, please do contact me. The sooner the better. I am much more generally available through the week than I'm over the weekend. I have a lot of family responsibilities. I do try to get back to people in time regardless. But the sooner you get to me, the sooner I can get back to you. And especially if there's anything you're asking about where you might need more time, it is much easier for me to give an extension if you contact me days in advance than it is if you're contacting me at 11:45 p.m. on Sunday, let alone on Monday. So I hope you've all found this to be helpful. I hope you are doing well. And yes, same to you, Yasmin, and to everyone else. Enjoy the rest of your day. Okay. See you soon, recording.